Out past the routes we never think about, there's a hidden world of abandoned ships. And they're not just scrap metal, each one is a frozen decision. A storm, a war, a company that vanished, a mistake nobody wanted to pay for. Some were pushed onto shore by brutal currents. Others were left on purpose because tearing them apart cost more than walking away. Either way, the sea keeps the evidence and Glenn slowly rewrites the story. So if you had the chance to step on board one of these forgotten vessels, would you? Because our first stop isn't one shipwreck. It's a whole coastline of them, where the wrecks aren't hidden underwater, they're lined up on the sand. Shipwreck Beach, Kaiolohia, Lānaʻi, Hawaii. Hawaii is supposed to feel like a postcard: soft sand, bright water, nothing that makes you uneasy. But on Lānaʻi's north shore, the ocean doesn't feel friendly. It feels methodical. This stretch is called Kaiolohia, better known as Shipwreck Beach, a long, wind-beaten coastline where a shallow reef and rough, rocky shallows have claimed vessels for generations. Depending on how you measure it, the shoreline runs roughly 6 to 8 miles, about 10 to 13 kilometers. And along that span, people often talk about a dozen or more wrecks scattered across the sand and reef. Most of them don't even look like ships anymore, just ribs and plates, twisted frames, broken silhouettes half buried in sand, so weathered you'd miss them unless you already knew where to look. But one wreck is impossible to ignore. Just offshore, perched on the reef like a rusted landmark, sits the YOG-42, sometimes written YOGN-42, an older fuel barge from the 1940s. And here's what makes it even stranger: it wasn't built like a typical ship. In that era, materials were tight, so some vessels were made with ferrocement ferroconcrete, concrete reinforced with steel. The result is this heavy, stubborn shape that doesn't disappear easily. The YOG-42 was launched in 1943 and later intentionally grounded on Lānaʻi around 1949 to 1950, left behind like something that outlived its purpose. From the beach, it looks like the ocean is swallowing it in slow motion, wave after wave, year after year, while the hull keeps holding on, as if it refuses to let the story end. That's what makes Shipwreck Beach different. It isn't one disaster. It's a pattern, nature, economics, and human decisions stacking up in the same place until the coastline starts to feel like a museum, with no tickets, no guards, and no plaques to explain what you're looking at. One quick reality check: this is not a swimming beach. People warn about strong currents and rough conditions here for a reason. And once you've seen a ghost ship sitting in bright Hawaiian sunlight, quiet, permanent, and completely out of place, it becomes easier to believe the ocean is full of places like this. Because out here, the wind and current don't just move water, they move history. And sometimes they keep working until a ship stops being a ship and becomes part of the shore. Klein Curaçao Caribbean, the lighthouse, and 2 wrecks. Out in the Dutch Caribbean, about 10 kilometers southeast of Curaçao, there's a flat, sun-blasted island called Klein Curaçao, only about 1.7 square kilometers, with no permanent residents. At first glance, it feels unreal. Bright sand, hard wind, and an emptiness so complete it almost sounds louder than waves. And then you see the landmark that proves people have been here, trying to survive this place, and trying to warn others away. The island's old lighthouse was first built in the mid-19th century. The first tower was destroyed by a major storm in the late 1800s, and a later structure still stands further inland today, weathered and fading. But the lighthouse isn't alone. On the windward side, where reefs and surf hit hardest, Klein Curaçao becomes a kind of accidental archive. The most famous wreck here is the Maria Bianca Guidesman, a small tanker that has been steadily torn apart by waves since 1988. Not far down the beach, there's another wreck that makes the danger feel personal. A Venezuelan fishing boat with its name still visible on the bow. Carolina of Pampatar, a reminder that you don't need a massive storm or a dramatic headline for a ship to be claimed out here. Caribbean Compass. Klein Curaçao is unsettling because everything is so exposed. The sun, the wind, the reef, the mistakes. The lighthouse is what humans built to impose order. The wrecks are what the island kept. Tangalooma. Off the west coast of Moreton Island, Mulgumpin, not far from Tangalooma Island Resort, there's a line of weathered hulls sitting in bright, shallow water. From the beach, it almost looks arranged too evenly spaced, too perfectly positioned. And that's because it was. This isn't the result of one bad day at sea. It's a group of 15 old ships that were placed here over time, between 1963 and 1984, to help create a calmer area for boats in Moreton Bay. A practical, engineered solution that reshaped the shoreline. But what happened after that is why people remember this place. Year by year, the metal surfaces became structure. The structure became shelter, and gradually, marine growth started to cover the hulls until the ships stopped looking like machines and started acting like habitat. Today, the site is widely known for clear, shallow water viewing and a surprisingly rich variety of fish and sea life. That transformation is the real story. A human-made solution that ended up creating something living. Something people now come to see up close, with masks, fins, and a slow floating pace. A quick reality check, conditions here can still shift. Water movement changes with the day, so it's always worth choosing calm weather, staying aware, and keeping it simple. Tangalooma isn't about drama, it's about time. A place that started as engineering and quietly turned into ecology. MS World Discoverer Solomon Islands. The name sounds heroic, World Discoverer. But its story ends in a place so remote it feels like the map itself forgot it. The ship was German, built in 1974, and spent decades as an expedition-style cruise vessel. Small enough to reach places the big liners couldn't. Built for travelers who wanted the edges of the world, not the easy parts. Then, on April 30th, 2000, while transiting the Sandfly Passage in the Solomon Islands, it hit an uncharted reef, the kind of collision that turns a normal voyage into a countdown. With the damage worsening, the decision was made to ground the ship in Roderick Bay to keep it from going under. Everyone on board was evacuated safely. And that's the surreal part. This wasn't a dramatic vanishing at sea. It was a controlled ending, deliberate, practical, almost quiet. A ship designed to keep moving was intentionally parked in a sheltered bay and never moved again. Over time, the World Discoverer became something else entirely, a half-sunken landmark, slowly oxidizing in tropical air, with nature reclaiming the decks and corridors that used to hold guests, dinners, and departure announcements. What remains is a reminder that the most haunting shipwrecks aren't always the ones that happen in the middle of nowhere. Sometimes they're the ones that are saved on purpose, only to be abandoned in plain sight. The abandoned concrete ship. Down in southern Russia, in the lower reaches of the Volga, in Astrakhan Oblast, not far from where the river opens toward the Caspian Sea, there's a ship that looks wrong at first glance. Because the hull isn't steel the way you expect. It's reinforced concrete built around a metal framework, with certain sections still made from iron where concrete wouldn't make sense. Up close, the surface tells the whole story: cracked concrete, exposed rebar, and edges that look like the ship is slowly being unmade by time. The strange part is that this isn't a one-off invention. Concrete ships were designed and built in different countries during periods when metal was in short supply, a practical workaround, even if it felt counterintuitive. And this specific vessel? Its original purpose is still unclear. Observers have guessed it may have been a small carrier used for liquids or general cargo, but there's no definitive identification, no famous name, no clear paper trail, just a structure that ended up stranded in the river's lowlands. That mystery is what gives it weight. Because most shipwreck stories end with a dramatic moment. This one doesn't. It feels like an artifact from an era of improvisation, an engineering solution that made sense on a spreadsheet, and then, at some point, simply stopped being worth saving. And now it sits there, quiet and stubborn, proof that even on a river, not every ship sinks. Some are just left behind and slowly turned into landscape. Yellow Submarine in New York. Just beyond the noise of Coney Island, past the rides, the boardwalk, the bright lights, there's a quiet inlet where the city feels unfinished. And in that muddy water sits something you don't expect to see in New York at all, a small homemade yellow submarine. It's called WWII, a 45-foot sub built in 1967 by a Brooklyn shipyard worker named Jerry Bianco, pieced together from salvaged metal with one obsession in mind: reaching the wreck of the Italian ocean liner Andrea Doria off Nantucket Sound. But the dream never really left the shoreline. When Bianco attempted the launch, the sub tipped onto its side and got stuck in the mud, turning a bold plan into a public, half-submerged monument. Over the years, it shifted and deteriorated. Accounts describe it breaking loose during a storm in 1981 and ending up in the spot where it's still seen today, sometimes more visible at low tide, sometimes almost gone again. What makes WWII eerie isn't danger, it's the contrast. A machine designed for deep water trapped in a shallow creek. A voyage that never happened. And yet it refuses to fully disappear, so much so that the neighborhood even has an informational plaque telling its story. WWII is what a big idea looks like when time gets to it. Not a legend at sea, but a stubborn, rusting reminder that some adventures end before they ever begin. A white structure over the water, Hawaii. In Hawaii, there's a clean white structure set above calm water, simple lines, open air, and a view that feels intentionally uncluttered. From a distance, it almost looks like modern design placed gently on the bay. But the closer you get, the more you notice the way people behave here. The energy shifts, steps slow down, conversations fade, even the smallest sounds, footsteps, wind moving through the open space, water tapping against the surface, start to feel louder because everything else gets quieter. You walk through it without needing directions. The architecture does the guiding. It frames the water, the horizon, the light. It gives you room to look down, then out, then back again, like it's asking you to pay attention to what's beneath the surface and what the surface refuses to say out loud. And that's the strange power of a place like this. There's no spectacle, no big reveal, no wow moment. Just a steady, unmistakable sense that you're standing somewhere people don't treat casually. You can feel it in the way visitors pause at the edges, the way they lean on the railing, the way they take a breath before moving on. Some hold their phones and never press record. Others do record, but even then, they keep it brief, like they don't want to break the mood. The light in Hawaii is bright, almost too honest. It makes the water look clear and peaceful, but the atmosphere here carries weight anyway. It's the kind of weight that doesn't need explanation. You don't have to know every detail to understand why the tone is different. And when you leave, you don't leave with adrenaline. You leave with a slower heartbeat, like the place quietly reminded you that not every stop on a journey is about discovery. Some stops are about stillness. Duke of Lancaster, Wales, UK, the fun ship that turned into a floating canvas. On the River Dee in Lanarkshire Moor, North Wales, the TSS Duke of Lancaster sits high and dry, close enough to the water to feel like it should still depart, but fixed in place like a retired animal that never made it back to sea. It started life as a working passenger ship, built by Harland and Wolff in Belfast, launched in 1955 and completed in 1956, serving British Railways routes across the Irish Sea before the era of car ferries pushed ships like this toward retirement. Then came the reinvention. In August 1979, the ship was brought to Lanarkshire Moor with a plan to become a dockside attraction and retail/leisure complex, locally known as the Fun Ship. The idea was bold, but the reality turned into years of friction, planning issues, local disputes, and repeated stop-start attempts to make the project work. By 2004, the owners closed it and effectively walked away, leaving the ship to weather in public view. And that's when the Duke of Lancaster became something else. Around 2012 to 2013, the hull was used as a large-scale street art project, with artists painting murals across the exterior, turning a decaying ship into a landmark people came to see for its artwork as much as its history. But the ship couldn't hold that identity either. In 2017, much of the exterior artwork was painted over in solid black, wiping the open-air gallery look almost overnight. The Duke of Lancaster is haunting for a simple reason. It's not a ship that sank. It's a ship that stopped and then got repurposed, repainted, and reimagined until all that was left was the silhouette of a second life that never fully happened. Suwannee Belle, often misheard as Suwannee Belle, the abandoned roadside riverboat in Pennsylvania. Out in rural Pennsylvania, there's a riverboat sitting on land like it took a wrong turn and never found the water again. Most people call it the Suwannee Belle. It was built in 1985 by La Crosse Riverboat Company in La Crosse, Wisconsin, designed in the style of an old paddle wheeler. On paper, it was a working attraction, not a relic. It could carry about 150 passengers, and it once ran sightseeing routes around New York City's waterways, including the East River and the Hudson. Then its life got complicated. It bounced through different stops, including Mobile, Alabama, and later Johns Pass, Florida, where it operated tours. In 1988, a new owner tried to run it as a regular sternwheeler experience again. But later that year, it was blown far off course, damaged, and ended up grounded on a sandbar near Hernando Beach. After that, the riverboat era was basically over. It was decommissioned in 1991 and stored away. The next chapter is the one that makes it feel so surreal. In 2003, a buyer purchased the boat for $1 and had it hauled from New Jersey to Berks County, Pennsylvania, aiming to turn it into a themed restaurant complex. To move it, major parts like the paddle wheels and upper structures had to be removed. The business later went bankrupt, and after an auction in 2005, the boat was left behind while nearby businesses moved on. And that's why it's so unsettling to see today. It looks like a place that should be full of music and dinner lights. But instead, it's just a riverboat with no river, sitting quietly in the grass, like a plan that ran out of time. Staten Island Tugboat Graveyard, the boneyard you're not supposed to walk into. On Staten Island's west shore, along the Arthur Kill, the narrow channel between Staten Island and New Jersey, there's a stretch of marsh where old harbor boats seem to pile up and never leave. Locals call it the Tugboat Graveyard, but it's essentially a marine scrapyard in Rossville that's been operating since the 1930s. It's been known by several names over the years, including Wheat Marine and the Arthur Kill Boatyard, and later became part of the Don John scrap processing operation. From a distance, it looks like the shoreline is made of metal. Rusting hulls sit in shallow water and mud, tilted at odd angles, half swallowed by reeds. Some boats are still recognizable. Others have collapsed into shapes that barely read as vessels anymore. At its peak, people reported hundreds of boats here. Today, sources often describe around 100 in various states of decay. And that's what makes this place feel different from the open ocean wrecks. This isn't one dramatic moment. It's slow accumulation. Boats brought in for parts, salvage, storage, and dismantling, then left to time and tide when their value ran out. Over decades, the site accidentally turned into something like an outdoor museum, except it's not curated, it's not labeled, and it's not officially for visitors. Quick reality check, access is restricted and posted no trespassing. People often view it from a distance or from the water rather than entering private property. Because the most haunting part isn't what you can climb onto. It's the idea that a working harbor can quietly collect its own leftovers until the shoreline starts to look like a memory bank for an entire shipping era. USS Inaugural, the museum ship that the river took back. For years, this ship was one of the easiest pieces of history to visit in St. Louis, moored near the riverfront, open to the public, framed by the Gateway Arch. It was the USS Inaugural AM-242, launched in 1944 and commissioned that same year. After its service life, it was brought to St. Louis and turned into a floating museum in 1968. Then, the Mississippi did what it does at its worst. During the Great Flood of 1993, the Inaugural broke loose from its moorings, drifted downstream, and eventually sank on the Missouri side of the river, south of downtown near the Poplar Street Bridge area. What followed wasn't a dramatic rescue. It was slow defeat. Salvage plans were studied, but the reality was brutal. Restoring it as a museum ship wasn't feasible. Its historic landmark designation was later withdrawn because it no longer met the criteria. By 2013, with river levels dropping low enough to expose more of the hulk, the ship was effectively treated as a total loss, with scrapping efforts planned when conditions allowed. And that's what makes the USS Inaugural so haunting. It didn't disappear in a storm out at sea. It survived long enough to become a museum, then got pulled back into the river's logic until preservation stopped being a possibility. Some ships end with a battle. This one ended with water, time, and paperwork. Ballina's concrete ship, SS Crete Boom. On the River Moy, just outside the town of Ballina in County Mayo, there's a ship that looks like it shouldn't exist, because it's not steel in the usual sense, it's concrete. Locals call it the SS Crete Boom, often written as Crete Boom, and it sits on a sandbank between Ballina and Belleek woods, half stranded, half claimed by the tide. The reason it was built is simple and kind of surreal. In the late 1910s, when steel was difficult to get, Britain experimented with vessels made from ferroconcrete, concrete reinforced with steel bars. The Crete Boom was part of that experiment, one of a small fleet intended to tow barges and move heavy cargo like iron ore. By the time the ship reached Ireland, its working life was basically over. In 1937, the Ballina Harbor Commissioners bought it with a blunt, practical plan: sink it and use it as a barrier to help manage sand and protect the channel. But when they brought it in for assessment, the hull was already damaged and taking on water, too risky to move the way they intended. So instead, it became something else, a landmark, a 38-meter, 267-ton concrete relic that never fully disappears because it doesn't rot like wood, and it doesn't collapse like lighter metal hulls. That's the quiet power of the Crete Boom. It's not dramatic. It doesn't haunt the river with legends. It just sits there, proof that sometimes the strangest shipwrecks aren't accidents at sea. They're the leftovers of big ideas that outlived their moment. And that's the strange truth about abandoned ships. They don't just disappear. They linger, half in the world we know, half in a world that moved on without them. A ship can be built for speed, for trade, for comfort, for big promises, and still end up silent, sun-bleached, and forgotten until all that's left is a shape on the water and questions nobody answers anymore. Because the ocean doesn't only take things down. Sometimes it leaves them behind as reminders. If you could visit just one of the places in this video, which one would it be and why? Drop your pick in the comments. And if you want more stories like this, hidden places, forgotten machines, and the strange edges of the world, hit subscribe. See you in the next one.